They say revenge is a dish best served cold. Well, I'm 73 years old, and I've had plenty of time to let mine freeze solid as the Montana winter that nearly killed me. My name is Jacob Thornwood, and this is the story of how my own wife tried to destroy me and how I made damn sure she failed. I should have seen it coming. Hell, maybe part of me did, but when you've been married to someone for 47 years, you tend to give them the benefit of the doubt. That was my first mistake. It started on a Tuesday morning in October, 3 years ago. The aspens were golden, the elk were bugling in the high country, and I was preparing for what I thought would be just another hunting season. I'd been guiding hunters through these mountains since before most of them were born, knew every ridge and valley like the lines on my weathered hands. My lodge, Thornwood Outfitters, sat on 300 acres of prime Montana real estate, worth more money than I cared to think about. Margaret, my wife, had been acting strange for months. Cold. Distant. I'd chalked it up to age, to the natural drift that happens when two people have been together as long as we had. I was wrong about that too. Jacob, she said that morning, her voice honey-sweet in a way that should have set off alarms. I was thinking, maybe this year you should take that big buck you've been tracking. The one on the North Ridge. I looked up from my coffee, surprised. Margaret had always been against trophy hunting, said it was wasteful, disrespectful to the animal. That buck's on the Henderson property, I said slowly. You know I don't hunt where I don't have permission. Oh, I'm sure Tom Henderson wouldn't mind, she said, not meeting my eyes. You two go way back. We do, I agreed. Which is why I'd never disrespect him by hunting his land without asking first. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Suit yourself. I just thought you might want to bag something impressive while you still can. While I still can. The word stuck with me all day. Was she commenting on my age? My health? I was old, sure, but I could still outwork men half my age. I could track a wounded elk through a blizzard, could shoot a 3-inch group at 300 yards, could read the mountains like they were speaking directly to me. But Margaret's comment nagged at me, wormed its way under my skin like a tick. And maybe that's exactly what she wanted. The next few weeks passed in a blur of guiding clients, maintaining equipment, and preparing for the harsh winter ahead. Margaret grew increasingly attentive, which should have been my second warning. She brought me coffee in the mornings, asked about my day, even accompanied me on a few scouting trips. I thought maybe we were reconnecting, finding our way back to each other. God, I was a fool. It was late November when everything came crashing down. I'd taken a client out before dawn, tracking a bull elk that had been eluding us for 3 days. The snow was falling heavy, the kind of snow that erases tracks and makes the whole world white and silent. We were on my property, near the northern boundary, when I finally got the elk in my sights. The shot was clean. The bull dropped where it stood, dead before it knew what happened. That's how I've always hunted, quick, respectful, no suffering. My client, a banker from Chicago named Patterson, was ecstatic. It was the biggest elk he'd ever taken, and I was happy for him. We field-dressed the animal, loaded it onto the ATV, and headed back to the lodge. That's when I saw the game warden's truck parked in my driveway. Steve Morrison had been the local warden for 15 years. Good man, fair, understood that most hunters out here were respectful of the land and the animals. But the look on his face when I pulled up told me this wasn't a friendly visit. Jacob, he said, his voice formal, official. I need to talk to you. Steve, what's going on? He glanced at Patterson, then back at me. I received a report that you've been engaging in illegal hunting activities. Poaching on neighboring properties, exceeding bagged limits, hunting out of season. My blood ran cold. That's horseshit, Steve, and you know it. I'd like to believe that, Jacob. But I've got to investigate. I've got photos, dates, even GPS coordinates. The evidence is substantial. Evidence? What evidence? He pulled out a folder from his truck, handed it to me. Inside were dozens of photographs. Me, or someone who looked remarkably like me, standing over dead animals. Elk, deer, even a mountain lion. The photos were grainy, taken from a distance, but the figure in them wore my coat, my hat, carried my rifle. But I hadn't taken any of those animals. "This is bullshit," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "These are fake. Doctored. I don't know who took these, but it wasn't me. Jacob, I've got to ask you to surrender your hunting licenses pending investigation. And I'm going to need to search your property. Search my—" I stopped myself, took a deep breath. Getting angry wouldn't help. "Fine. Search whatever you want. You won't find anything because there's nothing to find." But even as I said it, a sick feeling grew in my stomach. Because if someone had gone to this much trouble to frame me, they wouldn't have stopped at fake photographs. Steve spent 3 hours searching my property. My lodge, my outbuildings, my equipment sheds. And in the old smokehouse behind the main building, the one I rarely used anymore, he found them. Antlers. Hides. Meat. All from animals that, according to the tags I'd never seen before, had been taken illegally. "Jacob," Steve said, and I could hear the disappointment in his voice. "I'm going to have to cite you. This is serious. You're looking at criminal charges, possibly federal charges if any of these animals were endangered species." I stood there numb as he wrote up the citations. Patterson had already left, probably terrified of being associated with a poacher. My reputation, built over 50 years of ethical hunting and conservation work, was being destroyed right in front of me. And then I saw her, Margaret, standing in the window of the lodge, watching. And on her face was the smallest hint of a smile. That's when I knew. That's when everything clicked into place. I've tracked wounded animals through miles of wilderness, followed signs so subtle most men wouldn't even see them. Finding evidence of my wife's betrayal was a different kind of hunt, but I approached it the same way, patiently, methodically, following the trail wherever it led. The first thing I did was hire a lawyer. Not the family attorney Margaret and I had used for years, but a criminal defense specialist out of Billings named Sarah Chin. She was sharp, ruthless, and expensive as hell. But if I was going down, I wasn't going down without a fight. "Mr. Thornwood," she said during our first meeting, "I'm going to be blunt with you. The evidence against you is substantial. If this goes to trial, the prosecution will have photographs, physical evidence, and potentially testimony from your wife." "My wife?" "She's the one who filed the initial report with the game warden." The words hit me like a gut punch, even though I'd already suspected. Suspecting and knowing are two different animals entirely. "Why?" I asked. "Why would she do this?" Sarah slid a document across her desk. I did some digging. "Your wife filed for divorce 2 weeks before she made the report to the game warden. According to Montana law, if you're convicted of these crimes, you'll likely lose your hunting licenses permanently, face substantial fines, possibly jail time. More importantly, your business, Thornwood Outfitters, would be shut down. The property would have to be sold. And as my wife, she'd get half. More than half, actually. Her attorneys are arguing that since you've been engaging in criminal activities related to the business, she's entitled to a larger share to compensate for the damage to her reputation and emotional distress." I sat back stunned. 47 years of marriage, and it had all been leading to this. She's been planning this for a while, hasn't she? The divorce filing suggests at least several months of preparation. The evidence against you, the photographs, the planted materials, that would have taken even longer to set up. Who helped her? There's no way she did this alone. Margaret doesn't know the first thing about hunting or tracking. Someone had to take those animals, stage those photos. That's what we need to find out. And Mr. Thornwood? We need to find out fast. Your preliminary hearing is in 3 weeks. I left Sarah's office with my mind racing. Margaret had help, that much was certain. But who? And more importantly, how was I going to prove my innocence? The answer came to me that night as I sat alone in my lodge, banned from hunting, my reputation in tatters, my life's work crumbling around me. I was a hunter. And like any good hunter, I needed to understand my prey. I started with Margaret's phone records. Took some creative maneuvering and a friendly contact at the phone company who owed me a favor from years back, but I got them. Over the past 6 months, there was one number she called more than any other. A local number I didn't recognize. I ran it through a reverse lookup. The number belonged to a man named Dale Rickman. Dale fucking Rickman. I should have known. Dale was a guide, like me, but where I'd built my business on ethics and respect for the land, Dale had built his on shortcuts and intimidation. He'd been trying to buy my property for years, wanted to turn it into one of those luxury hunting operations where rich assholes paid 50 grand to shoot a drugged elk in a pen. I'd told him no every time, and each refusal had made him a little more bitter. But I never thought he'd stoop to this. Never thought Margaret would help him. I dug deeper. Found out that Dale and Margaret had been seen together around town, at the diner, at the hardware store, always in public, always careful. But there were receipts too. Hotel rooms in nearby towns, charged to a credit card I didn't recognize but that Margaret had clearly been using. The affair had been going on for at least a year, maybe longer. And then I found the real smoking gun. A property listing from a real estate website, saved to Margaret's computer. My property, Thornwood Outfitters, listed for sale with Dale Rickman named as the potential buyer. The listing was dated 3 weeks before the game warden showed up at my door. They'd planned the whole thing. Margaret would frame me, I'd be convicted, forced to sell. Dale would buy the property at a discount. After all, who wants to buy land from a convicted poacher? And Margaret would get her share of the proceeds plus whatever Dale had promised her. It was elegant, in a sick sort of way. And it had almost worked. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated me. If there's one thing I've learned in 7 decades of life, it's that patience is the most important tool in a hunter's arsenal. You can have the best rifle, the finest scope, all the fancy equipment in the world, but if you don't have patience, you'll never bag your trophy. So I waited, watched, gathered evidence like I was tracking an elusive prey through deep snow. I started with the photographs Steve Morrison had shown me. Sarah had gotten copies through Discovery, and I studied them for hours. The images showed a man in hunting gear standing over dead animals, but the face was never quite clear. Always in shadow, always at an angle. But there were details that didn't match me. The stance was wrong. The way the rifle was held. Small things that most people wouldn't notice, but I did. I took the photos to an expert, a forensic analyst Sarah knew in Seattle. It took him 3 days, but he found what I was looking for. These images have been digitally altered, he told me over a video call. Subtle work, professional even, but it's there. The coat and hat have been superimposed over the original figure. Whoever did this had access to good software and knew what they were doing. Can you tell who the original figure was? I can clean up the images, remove the alterations. Give me a week. While I waited, I focused on the physical evidence, the antlers, hides, and meat Steve had found in my smokehouse. Someone had put them there, and recently. The smokehouse had a lock, and only 2 people had keys, me and Margaret. I checked the lock. No signs of forced entry, which meant it had been opened with a key. Margaret's key. But I needed more than that. I needed proof that she'd been in there, that she'd planted the evidence. So I installed a hidden camera in the smokehouse, pointed at the door. If she came back to add more evidence or remove something, I'd have her on video. 3 days later, the camera caught her. It was late at night, well after midnight. Margaret entered the smokehouse with a flashlight, looking nervous, furtive. She wasn't alone. Dale Rickman was with her. They spoke in hushed tones, too quiet for the camera's microphone to pick up clearly, but their actions were damning. Dale was carrying a bag, which he set down and opened. Inside were more animal parts, looked like deer antlers, and what might have been elk hide. Margaret directed him where to place everything, arranging the evidence to look natural, like it had been there for months rather than minutes. They worked quickly, efficiently, like they'd done this before. When they finished, Dale pulled Margaret close, kissed her. Not the kind of kiss you give a co-conspirator. The kind of kiss that spoke of familiarity, of intimacy, of promises made in the dark. I watched the video 3 times, my anger growing with each viewing. Not just at the betrayal, though that cut deep, but at the sheer callousness of it. They were destroying my life, my reputation, everything I built, and they were doing it with smiles on their faces. But anger wouldn't help me. Anger made you sloppy, made you take shots you shouldn't take. I needed to stay cold, focused, patient. The forensic analyst sent his cleaned-up images a week later. With the digital alterations removed, the face of the man in the photographs was clear. Dale Rickman. He'd been the one killing the animals, posing for the photographs, doing it all on my property while I was away guiding clients. The dates on the images corresponded to times when I had solid alibis. I was with clients, sometimes multiple witnesses, who could testify I was miles away from where the photographs were taken. Sarah was ecstatic when I showed her the evidence. "This is good, Jacob. This is really good. We can prove the photographs are fake, prove that Margaret and Rickman planted the evidence. We might even be able to flip this into charges against them." "That's exactly what I want," I said. "But I need more. I need to know why. I need to understand what they're planning next. The why is obvious: money, property, greed. As for what's next, probably they're waiting to see if you take a plea deal. If you do, the property goes up for sale faster. I'm not taking any deal. I know. Which means we prepare for trial. And with this evidence, I think we can win." But I wasn't content with just winning. Winning meant I'd walk away with my reputation damaged, my marriage destroyed, my faith in people shattered. I wanted more than that. I wanted them to pay. In hunting, there's a technique called a blind. You conceal yourself, make yourself invisible, and wait for your prey to come to you. Sometimes you use bait. Sometimes you use calls to mimic the sounds of a potential mate or a rival. The key is to make your prey think they're in control, that they're the hunter, right up until the moment you pull the trigger. I decided to set a blind for Margaret and Dale, and the bait would be my apparent defeat. I called Margaret one evening, my voice carefully modulated to sound tired, beaten down. It wasn't hard. Part of me felt exactly that way. "Margaret," I said, "we need to talk." "About what?" Her voice was cold, distant. The voice of a stranger. "About ending this. The lawyers, the charges, all of it. I can't do this anymore." Silence on the other end. Then, carefully, "What are you saying, Jacob?" "I'm saying maybe you're right. Maybe it's time to sell the property, split everything up, go our separate ways. I'll plead guilty to the charges, pay the fines, and we can be done with this." More silence. I could almost hear her mind working, calculating. "Why the change of heart?" "I'm 73 years old, Margaret. I'm tired. Fighting this is killing me. My lawyer says even if I win, It'll cost hundreds of thousands in legal fees. The property will have to be sold anyway just to pay for everything. At least this way, we can control it. I need to think about this. Don't think too long. My preliminary hearing is in a week. After that, things get complicated. I hung up before she could respond, then sat back and waited. The camera I'd installed in the smokehouse wasn't the only surveillance I'd set up. I'd placed hidden cameras around the property, in the lodge, even in Margaret's car. It was probably illegal, might have gotten me in trouble if anyone found out, but at this point, I was beyond caring about minor legal infractions. Margaret called Dale 30 seconds after I hung up with her. Thanks to the spyware I'd installed on her phone, again, probably illegal, again, didn't care, I could hear both sides of the conversation. "He wants to give up," she told Dale, her voice excited. "He said he'll plead guilty, sell the property." "Just like that?" Dale sounded suspicious. "Jacob Thornwood doesn't give up. He's stubborn as a goddamn mule." He sounded tired, Dale. Defeated. "I think we finally broke him. Maybe. Or maybe he's playing us." "How? What could he possibly do?" "We've got him dead to rights. The evidence is solid. I don't know, but I don't trust it. Let's give it a few days, see if he's serious." "We don't have a few days. His hearing is next week. If he decides to fight, this could drag on for months. We need to move now." They talked for another 20 minutes, and by the end, Dale had agreed to move forward. They'd contact the prosecutor, let him know I was willing to plead guilty. They'd start the process of listing the property for sale. They'd begin dividing up their anticipated windfall. Everything was falling into place. But I had one more card to play. The next day, I called a meeting with Steve Morrison, the game warden. He was surprised to hear from me. We hadn't spoken since the day he'd cited me, but he agreed to meet. We met at a diner in town, neutral ground. Steve looked uncomfortable, like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Jacob," he said, as I slid into the booth across from him, "I can't talk about your case." "You know that. I'm not here to talk about my case," I said. "I'm here to talk about yours." "Mine?" I pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. "I've been doing some investigating on my own. Found some interesting things." Steve opened the folder, his expression growing darker as he flipped through the pages. Inside were the photographs, the forensic analysis proving they'd been doctored, the surveillance footage of Margaret and Dale planting evidence. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "I've been framed, Steve. By my wife and Dale Rickman. They've been planning this for months, maybe longer. They wanted my property, and they were willing to destroy me to get it. Why are you showing me this? You should be showing your lawyer. My lawyer has copies. But I wanted you to see it first. You're a good man, Steve. I know you were just doing your job when you cited me. But I also know you care about the truth. And the truth is, I'm innocent." He stared at the documents for a long moment, his jaw clenched. "If this is real, it's real. Every bit of it. Then Margaret and Rickman need to be arrested. They've committed fraud, filed false reports, planted evidence. That's serious shit, Jacob. I know. But here's the thing. Right now, they think they've won. They think I'm giving up, pleading guilty. If we move too fast, they might destroy evidence, might flee. I want them caught red-handed. I want them to pay for what they've done." Steve leaned back, studying me. "What are you proposing?" "Give me 1 week. 1 week to gather more evidence, to make sure the case against them is airtight. Then you can arrest them. I'll testify, I'll cooperate fully. But I need that week. I don't know, Jacob. If I sit on this and they destroy evidence, they won't. They're too confident. They think I'm beaten. Let them think that for just a little longer." He hesitated, then nodded slowly. 1 week. But if anything goes sideways, this is on you. Fair enough. I left the diner feeling energized for the first time in weeks. The pieces were moving into place. Margaret and Dale thought they'd won, thought they were about to claim their prize. But the trap was set, and they were walking right into it. All I had to do was wait for them to take the bait. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning. By Wednesday night, everything was ready. Sarah had filed motions with the court, submitting the forensic evidence, the surveillance footage, everything we gathered. But she'd done it quietly, without notifying the prosecution in advance. It was aggressive, possibly unethical, but Sarah had assured me it was legal. "We're going to ambush them," she'd said with a sharp smile. "They'll walk into that courtroom thinking you're going to plead guilty. Instead, we're going to blow their case apart." I'd spent the week continuing my act, playing the defeated old man. I'd called Margaret twice more, each time sounding more tired, more resigned. She'd eaten it up, had even started being nice to me again, probably figuring she could afford to be generous in victory. Dale, meanwhile, had already started planning his luxury hunting operation. I'd seen the architectural drawings he commissioned, heard him talking on the phone about investors and projected profits. He was counting his money before he'd even stolen it. Thursday morning dawned clear and cold. I dressed in my best suit, the one I'd worn to my daughter's wedding 20 years ago, and drove to the courthouse. Margaret was already there, sitting in the gallery with Dale beside her. They were trying to be discreet, maintaining a respectful distance, but I could see the way their hands brushed together, the secret smiles they shared. The prosecutor, a young guy named Matthews who looked fresh out of law school, approached me with a plea agreement. "Mr. Thornwood, we've prepared a deal for you. If you plead guilty to the charges, we'll recommend minimum fines and no jail time. Given your age and previous clean record, the judge will likely accept our recommendation." "That's very generous," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Can I have a moment to discuss it with my attorney?" "Of course." Sarah and I stepped into a conference room. She was practically vibrating with excitement. Ready to do this? More than ready. We returned to the courtroom. The judge, a stern woman named Helen Kowalski who'd been on the bench for 20 years, called the proceeding to order. "Mr. Thornwood," she said, "I understand the prosecution has offered you a plea agreement. How do you wish to proceed?" I stood, feeling every eye in the courtroom on me. Margaret and Dale were leaning forward, anticipation written on their faces. "Your Honor," I said clearly, "I reject the plea agreement. I wish to enter a plea of not guilty to all charges." The courtroom erupted. Matthews looked shocked. Margaret went pale. Dale's face turned red with anger. Judge Kowalski banged her gavel. "Order! Mr. Thornwood, are you certain about this decision?" "Completely certain, Your Honor." Sarah stood. "Your Honor, if I may, we have new evidence that we'd like to submit to the court. Evidence that conclusively proves my client's innocence and reveals a conspiracy to frame him." "Objection." Matthews was on his feet. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. We haven't seen any of this alleged evidence." "You're about to," Sarah said coolly. She pulled out a laptop, connected it to the courtroom's display system. "Your Honor, with your permission?" Judge Kowalski looked intrigued. "Proceed, Ms. Chen." For the next hour, Sarah methodically dismantled the case against me. She showed the forensic analysis of the photographs, proving they'd been digitally altered. She played the surveillance footage of Margaret and Dale planting evidence in my smokehouse. She presented phone records showing hundreds of calls between Margaret and Dale, hotel receipts, text messages discussing their plan. I watched Margaret's face as the evidence mounted. She went from pale to ghost white, her hands trembling. Dale tried to maintain his composure, but I could see the panic in his eyes. But Sarah wasn't done. She had one more piece of evidence, something even I hadn't known about. "Your Honor," she said, "we also have a recording. 2 weeks ago, Mrs. Thornwood and Mr. Rickman met at a motel outside town. They didn't know Mr. Thornwood had placed a recording device in Mrs. Thornwood's vehicle." Margaret shot to her feet. "That's illegal." "That's invasion of privacy. Montana is a one-party consent state for recordings," Sarah said smoothly. "And technically, as the owner of the vehicle, Mr. Thornwood had every right to place a recording device in it. But regardless, I think the court will find the contents enlightening." She pressed play. Margaret's voice came through the speakers, clear and cold. "Once Jacob is convicted, we'll have full control of the property. Your offer is still good?" Dale's voice. $3 million for the whole parcel. That's well below market value, but given the circumstances. Margaret, it's perfect. We'll sell it to you. You'll turn it into your hunting resort, and we'll split the profits. 50-50, like we agreed. Dale, and Jacob? Margaret, Jacob will be in jail, or bankrupt, or both. He'll be too broken to fight us. And even if he tries, who's going to believe a convicted poacher? They both laughed. The sound echoed through the silent courtroom like a death rattle. Judge Kowalski's expression was thunderous. "Mr. Matthews, I assume you'll be dropping all charges against Mr. Thornwood?" Matthews looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him. "Yes, Your Honor." "Immediately." "Good. Bailiff, take Mrs. Thornwood and Mr. Rickman into custody. They're charged with conspiracy, fraud, filing false police reports, and evidence tampering. I'm sure the prosecutor's office can come up with a few more charges as well." The bailiff moved toward Margaret and Dale. Dale tried to run, actually bolted for the door, but the bailiff was faster. He was tackled, handcuffed, and hauled to his feet. Margaret just sat there, staring at me with an expression of pure hatred. "How?" she whispered as they led her past me. "How did you know?" I leaned close, my voice low enough that only she could hear. "You forgot, Margaret. I'm a hunter. And you were never anything but prey." The legal proceedings took another 6 months to fully resolve. Margaret and Dale were both convicted on multiple charges. Dale got 5 years in prison and was ordered to pay substantial fines. His guiding license was permanently revoked, and his business collapsed. Margaret got 3 years, but served only 18 months before being released on parole. The divorce was finalized while she was in prison. She didn't get a dime from me. In fact, she was ordered to pay restitution for the damage to my business and reputation. I kept the property, kept my business, kept my dignity. Clients started coming back once the full story came out. Turns out people respect a man who fights back against injustice, who refuses to be broken no matter the odds. But the real victory wasn't legal or financial. It was personal. One cold morning in January, 2 years after that day in court, I was out tracking elk in the high country. The snow was deep, the air so cold it burned my lungs, and I'd never felt more alive. I was following a big bull I'd been watching for 3 seasons, not to kill it, but just to see it, to measure myself against it. I found the bull in a clearing, its breath steaming in the frigid air. It was magnificent, at least 6 points on each side, healthy and strong. It saw me, knew I was there, but didn't run. We stood there for maybe 30 seconds, predator and prey, hunter and hunted, 2 old survivors acknowledging each other. Then the elk turned and disappeared into the trees, and I let it go. I don't hunt much anymore. Don't need to. I've proven everything I needed to prove, to others and to myself. These days, I guide other hunters, teach them respect for the land and the animals, show them how to hunt with honor. Sometimes, late at night when the wind howls through the pines, I think about Margaret. Wonder if she regrets what she did, if she understands what she lost. 47 years of marriage, thrown away for greed and a piece of property. But mostly, I don't think about her at all. Because here's the truth about revenge. It's not about making the other person suffer, though that's part of it. It's about refusing to be a victim. It's about standing up and fighting back when the whole world seems arrayed against you. It's about being the hunter, not the hunted. Margaret tried to destroy me. Tried to take everything I'd built, everything I'd worked for. She thought I was old, weak, that I'd go down easy. She was wrong. I'm still here, still standing, still working my land. The lodge is fuller than ever, my reputation restored, my name cleared. I've got my health, my independence, my self-respect. And Margaret? Last I heard, she was living in a trailer park in Idaho, working at a gas station, bitter and alone. Some might say I should feel bad about that. That I should have mercy, forgiveness, all those noble sentiments. But I'm a hunter. And hunters understand something that most people don't. Nature isn't fair, isn't kind, isn't forgiving. Nature is about survival, about strength, about refusing to quit even when the odds are against you. Margaret declared war on me. She set the trap, baited the hook, pulled the trigger. She just forgot that I was a better hunter than she ever was. And in the end, the prey became the predator, and the predator became the prey. That's not revenge. That's justice. That's nature. I'm 76 now, and last week I guided my final client. Not because I have to retire, but because I want to. It's time to pass the torch. Time to let younger men and women carry on the tradition. I've sold Thornwood Outfitters to a young couple from Bozeman. They're good people, ethical hunters, who understand the responsibility that comes with this land. They'll do right by it. As for me, I bought a small cabin further up in the mountains, a place where the nearest neighbor is 15 miles away, and the only sounds are wind, water, and wildlife. I'll spend my remaining years there, watching the seasons change, tracking the animals I no longer hunt, living in harmony with the land that's been my home for 7 decades. Yesterday, I received a letter. It was from Margaret, her first communication since the trial. I almost didn't open it, almost threw it in the fire without reading it. But curiosity got the better of me. The letter was short, written in her careful handwriting. Jacob, I know you'll never forgive me. I don't expect you to. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. Not for getting caught. I'm sorry for what I did, for what I became. Greed and fear turned me into someone I don't recognize. You deserve better. After 47 years together, you deserved honesty, respect, a partner who stood beside you instead of plotting against you. I hope you found peace. I hope the mountains still sing to you the way they always did. I hope you've forgiven yourself for trusting me, because you shouldn't feel guilty for that. Trust is a gift, and I threw it away. Take care of yourself, Jacob. You are always the better person. Margaret. I read the letter 3 times, then walked outside and watched the sun set over the mountains. The sky was painted in shades of orange and red, and a bull elk called from somewhere in the valley below. Did I forgive her? I don't know. Forgiveness is complicated, messy, harder than revenge ever was. But I understood something then, something I hadn't before. Margaret hadn't just tried to destroy me, she'd destroyed herself. The person she'd been when we first married, young and full of dreams, had been consumed by the person she became. And that was a tragedy all its own. I folded the letter and put it away. Maybe someday I'd respond. Maybe not. For now, I had mountains to walk, elk to track, a life to live. I'd survived the hunt. I'd won the war. And that, in the end, was enough. The sun disappeared behind the peaks, and I turned back toward my cabin, a lone figure against the vast Montana wilderness. Behind me, the elk called again, a sound that echoed through the valleys and canyons.